Happy Friday, everybody. Today is Fact Friday, and I've got my coat on. It's cold and rainy here in Pennsylvania, but we're taking it to the outside anyway. Today is Fact Friday, and the topic is your brain makes its own insulin, and it might be failing. Welcome to the Daily Spoonful, where I serve up bite-sized science and real talk to transform your health, one small change at a time. I'm Dr. Rose, and today's fact might just change the way you think about your brain and blood sugar. Did you know that the brain actually makes its own insulin? Most people don't. We usually think of insulin as a hormone made in the pancreas. And yes, that is true. But your brain also produces insulin locally, right inside your head, especially in areas like the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for memory and for learning. But here's where it gets serious. When your brain becomes insulin resistant, it can't use fuel properly. Neurons are starving for energy, and the communication between brain cells break down and cognitive decline begins. This is why many researchers now refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes, because of the link between the brain, insulin resistance, and neurodegeneration. Now let's zoom out for a second. Is insulin resistance systemic? Yes, it is. And that means it's all over the body. And it usually starts before the brain ever gets involved. In fact, insulin resistance most often begins in the muscle, specifically skeletal muscle. That's where the majority of glucose disposal should happen after you eat. But when muscle cells stop responding to insulin, glucose can't enter the muscle efficiently, and that's when your blood sugar begins to rise. The pancreas responds by pumping out more insulin to force glucose into those resistant cells. This is known as compensatory hyperinsulinemia, and it doesn't stop at the muscle. Once the muscle's full, the liver then becomes insulin resistant, cranking out glucose even when you don't need it. Fat cells start releasing inflammatory molecules and free fatty acids, and your entire metabolic system is under stress. And over time, this systemic inflammation and chronically elevated insulin will begin to affect the brain. Brain cells lose their sensitivity to the insulin, and when that happens, the consequences aren't just metabolic anymore. They become cognitive. So yes, brain insulin resistance often happens later in the chain, but when it does, that's when the symptoms like brain fog, memory loss, poor focus, and even dementia start to appear. Now here's the good news. A ketogenic or carnivore diet can bypass some of this damage. And when you stop relying on glucose and start fueling with ketones, the brain can still function, even when insulin signaling is impaired. That's why so many people notice sharper memory, clearer thinking, and more stable mood when they cut carbs and get into ketosis. Ketones feed the starving brain. So if you ever notice that you think better when you're fasting or your brain fog lifts on keto, now you know why. You're not imagining it. You're giving your brain an alternative fuel source, and you're protecting it from further damage. Yes, your brain makes its own insulin because that's how important it is. But when that process begins to fail, it affects more than your memory. It affects your ability to live fully, think clearly, and age well. Because as those neurons degenerate, it might be memory and thinking at first, but then it could be the part of the brain that is responsible for movement. You'll see people start moving and have trouble with ambulation. So if you want to protect your mind, sharpen your focus, and slow down cognitive decline, the best place to start is with your metabolic health. That means reducing processed carbs, stabilizing insulin, and giving your body a chance to heal before the damage reaches the brain. So you've heard me comment enough about even going from keto to carnivore, the difference in mental clarity. Have you noticed mental clarity, improved mood, or better focus since you're on going keto or carnivore? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your changes and what you've seen. If this video blew your mind or your mind fog, give it a like, share it, and make sure you subscribe. And if you haven't seen my full video on Alzheimer's as diabetes type 3, I'll put that at the end of this video. And also I'll link the series to what is ketosis, how to get in ketosis, and how to stay there. I'll explain how all this connects in more detail. I'll see you tomorrow in the next video.